Now we walk between the two towers and the bazillion tour groups into the town. One of my favorite pieces of classical music, and no, I don't know the name of it. Pretty little front yard with palm tree. As Rick says, trapped inside of this structure. Apparently been just apprehended for, I think she was part of trying to sell something, and the young man who was there selling fans, and they drove their motorcycle right on top of his bunch of fan stuff right there. He took off like a bat of hell, came flying by me down around that corner and ran into this church because he has sanctuary. To see this kind of thing because it's the collision between poverty and survival and the establishment, the administration of orderly government and society. And this is about some martyrs who opposed Napoleon's entry into from France into Spain because of the massacres done in Madrid. And so they were garroted after peaceably, as we're seeing here in this panel, receiving the last rites, and then they peaceably allowed themselves to be strangled as execution. And I'm guessing this was the garroting process. You went up there, you stood against that post, someone wrapped something around your neck and then tightened it up. A little bit better view of the specific bell tower. And notice that little tower in the back there with a bell on it. And then this tower here. We're behind this church, and what's interesting is this balcony upstairs with that arch. At one time it must have had a view of something. How long it's been since this painting was on here, I don't know. And this man that's playing alongside the building probably has a license. That's a beautiful crossover between these two buildings. We're now in Placa de Neri. I don't know if this is the church building they're talking about, but it's interesting. What's interesting are these gargoyle, for lack of a better term. Take a close look at them. Different than the ordinary. This one looks similar to what we think of as a gargoyle, some kind of imaginary animal. There, a character riding such an animal. This almost looks like a king. This a lion. There, a human figure. There, I guess another human figure. This is Plaza Sant Neri. Playground for kids, but also the Church of Santa Felipe Neri, which Gaudi attended. Still pockmarked from bombs and so forth that were meant for the government building to our left, about a half a block away. Presumably this is all the damage left here to memorialize that time period. Detail on nearby buildings. These reliefs were paid for by the guilds also. And one of these is of the Shoemaker Guild, so we'll be looking for something that indicates that. Here is the detail that we're looking for, right above what I just saw a moment ago. this means the Museum of Shoes, although I don't know what Calcat means. Although there's a shoe symbol there, so it must be the entrance to it. Okay, we're turning right at this intersection. We'll come back to the same intersection, but we're going down to look at the Jewish section now, or at least what remains of it. We're entering the old Jewish section, what was called El Kal, C-A-L-L, and Kotlan. Maybe a little evidence of the Jewish quarter other than these narrow streets, and a synagogue that I hope we're going to. I don't know the names of all these places, but you can tell that fruit was sold down here. Remember, there were 4,000 people crammed into the few blocks that this area represented. Probably the entrance of an antique synagogue, as the sign seems to suggest, that was brutally destroyed during a pogrom in 1391, and then in 1942 they finally expelled all of the Jews. Interesting story, in 1980 a historian tracked down the synagogue using old tax records. Now in this little Jewish synagogue, the oldest one in Europe, she claims it may be, and we may just be able to get a hint. Here is the east-west orientation of it. When I look outside, I don't get the sense that everything else is cattywampus to me, so I don't know. This young woman in a few minutes, the one with her back to us, speaks English, perfect English, and she's going to give me a little tour when the Spanish tourist is done. Look at this window design, almost looks Muslim. And does the fact that this is a subterranean building or interior suggest that, again, the debris on the outside rose from the original grade. Apparently, underneath this building, and we'll see it, are Roman artifacts, and this gives us a possible view that might have of where the form would have been relative to where we are. Obviously, you wouldn't have seen them both at the same time. These are from collections of the Association of the Jewish people who donated them, except for that scroll in there, which apparently is very old, and very, very old, and discovered in a flea market in Tangiers in Morocco. So a very novel finding, kind of like finding a Picasso original in a garage sale. So everything that looks new and different in stone design, like that angular bricks, is all new, Catalan. And the horizontal bricks, all that below there, is original. There's a copy of a document that's in the Museum of Barcelona, in which the king in 1267 had given a license to make some modifications to the building. All modifications to any buildings had to be sanctioned by the king. And the reason that was done was, she thinks, because a year before there had been an earthquake and necessitated that kind of construction. So the story behind these two, what look like basins, and they are, is that in the 13th century, when the Catholic Church dominated and the Pope blamed the Jews for the plague because he claimed that they poisoned the water of the rest of the people, and as a consequence the plague was spread. And the reason he was able to make that argument was because the Jews living in their own area, not a ghetto, she says, but rather a barrio kind of thing, just a tight community, and they were restricted to it, was they had their own water supply, number one, so in theory they could have poisoned the others' water supply, and number two, because they washed their hands and so forth, they didn't get the plague to the degree that everybody else did, because their hygiene was better, even though no one knew that was the reason. Anyway, so after the Inquisition, which gave three options, either convert to Christianity, leave the country in 3 days without any of your property or belongings, or be killed. Those who converted, or said they did, was a family, and that family was in the business of dyeing clothes. So one of these basins had water, and one of these basins held the coloring. So this is a stone, which is somewhat of an enigma because it's apparently from the Roman era, but it's written in Hebrew. And here is another stone that is Roman, apparently, and it may be that's the evidence there, perhaps. So to clarify, these more irregular stones down at the bottom, except for these which are quite regular, those are the Roman stones represented. The upper ones, which are relatively new, like recently, last 50 years or so. Then the flat brick, and then these larger stones that are laid in coarse work, 16th century. And then the bottom stuff that you see, that goes back to the Roman period. This is a funky little bar, narrow, right near the synagogue. Notice this, something from some earlier construction here. This was probably the outside of the building, this part on the left. And this has just been squeezed in.
Aquests són jardins, si ho pot pitjor per mi.
This is the Carre del Bisbe Bridge, or the Bridge of Sighs, built in the 1920s. These are the jutting angels. They're jutting straight out. These are music strumming angels. I'll look closely at the detail on this window. Man fighting a lion to something or others on that coat of arms. Another curious character, beast. And on this next window, mermaids. Probably Neptune. Another mermaid. Sexy looking chick. Another coat of arms with characters. Looking closely here, even these smaller details. Another very interesting face. And the next window's coat of arms looks like a couple of rams up on top there. Very interesting faces. On the opposite side of the street, some other interesting small details on the sides of these windows. These look like griffin type characters. I wonder who these lifelike people would have been. Not to be attacked by a herd of urchins. Now underneath these characters, I just noticed a whole line of individual but very tiny faces. Well, not all humans. Look at the facial expressions. I mean, the artist had a purpose in mind. You just have to wonder what it might have been. Is the difference in size intentional? And it's men and women both, plus some monsters. Now we're in Placa de Jaume, or Jaume. And this road leads back to Rambles. What is fascinating is this used to be the site of the Roman Forum, or Central Square. Interesting that history continues like it does. At this point, we are standing at the summit of Mount Tabor, all of 55 feet in height, elevation above the water we visited yesterday. It's the highest spot in the Barri Gòtic, in other words, the Gothic barrio. And it is the site of the Roman Temple of Augustus. This old millstone that you see right here, you can see that square in the center, that would have, not the square, but the rectangle would have been the turning axle. The Roman town of Barcino was started around 15 BC. We're stepping inside to look at the Roman columns of what must have been his great cathedral, for lack of a better term. Here we are, literally on the edge of the Roman Temple of Augustus. These are but 4 of the many columns in the lintel. These are at the back column, or the back end of a 120-foot long temple that it was, ending at the Forum where we were a few moments ago. Isn't it a irony, somewhat like that little palm we saw in that small square inside that house, that what was once the great temple, probably not surrounded by big buildings, has now been reduced to a small, insignificant artifact, if you will, ensconced, enclosed, with barely enough room to breathe, and these buildings all around it, and a huge city all around that. This is an early engraving from 1877, presumably, of these columns. Whether the artist took the license to make those detailed Corinthian tops, I don't know. Remember, we're standing at the back of the temple on the right, and the part in the front is where we just were in that plaza, that which was the Roman Forum. This is how it all might have looked. Apparently these are the remains of the medieval building that housed or surrounded these columns for many centuries. Here we're now at the back of the cathedral, and still another view of what is either a well-restored tower or a relatively new one. And looking over there, we can see the top of that one. Here, another tower of a church in Placa del Rei. Buildings that surround this square were, in the 13th and 15th century, the homes of the kings and queens of Catalunya, as well as, or Spanish kings, as well as Catalunya counts who had lived in some of these buildings. Looking rather cold and closed now, it was certainly important then. In this building, if I've got the correct building, before they added that 6-story, it looks 6-story to me, addition, and that may be this one here, is that addition, I don't really know, is a huge hall that was the throne room and reception room. It was there that Christopher Columbus, accompanied by 6 natives that he'd brought back from the New World in 1493. Several pure gold statues entered the royal palace, and King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel rose from their seats to welcome him home and honor him with the title of Admiral of the Oceans. How little did they even know then, although the gold statues were precursors, what it would do to the wealth and power of Spain. Okay, apparently right there is where the royal palace was. And this is the church. The palace's church, the chapel of St. Agatha. Its foundation is Roman. He's the right-hand man of the king, had his place here. And this apparently is a Renaissance era staircase. Looking into the Viceroy's residence now. Here with a well, pretty colonnaded. Again, the austerity of the outside of a building belies the tranquility and the beauty that can be found inside. And here over the stairway, this incredible coffered ceiling. We'll go up and take a little bit closer look at this. The camera can get us up inside. Well, it's got to score some points for heights. Picasso would probably like the whimsy of this piece of fencing in extraordinary size and shape. It's interesting, the buildings you see when you just wander around. I'm taking a walking direction back, which will take me across the Ramblas through a lot of streets. But this kind of design I've seen before, and it seems kind of, how can you say, gauche? In other words, cheap, and but perhaps not in its time. Encountered, it's not pretty for everybody. Be a fun place to live around. If you had a reason to be, as I say. Coming off that pretty square, I'm taking this street just to take it. Little squares. You wonder what prompted somebody to leave those spaces like that. They probably go back in antiquity as their source of existence. Even coming down that what looked like an innocuous street were several little restaurants. I think what we miss living in a place like Jackson is the intense density in cities. There's another big square. I have no idea what it is, but what I have done is arrived at the Waters Edge where I was yesterday. So now all I do is hang a right and go down and pick up my street, hang another right. Notice this little building as I go towards Museo Picasso. It's squeezed into this little space. Probably dovetails right around onto the street again. This is how you get privacy. Just a quarter, an eighth of a block off the main noisy street. Here just on Carre de la Princesa en route to Picasso's museum is this pretty little square. Probably prettier down there to the left, but I'm en route to the museum. Whatever it is, it's big and impressive. Looks like a fort, probably is a church, and there's a big park behind it. And then this pretty 19th century building, whatever it is, and somewhere here should be Picasso's museum. Beautiful 19th century building, whatever it is. Looks like the potential market. I just completed my tour, my walk through the Museo Picasso. Perhaps it would have been better if I had had the audio-video thing, but I'm still absolutely mystified by that modern stuff that he did towards the end. Even if you could understand it, even if it made sense somehow, why would you want to warp your view of the world? Maybe you would, but I wouldn't. I really got to see how they're going to do this. 3 guys on the bottom, 1 guy up on top. What I don't understand, why don't they put it up on the balcony up above and then pull down with it? This is a little park I saw earlier as I was walking toward and trying to find the Picasso Museum, but I didn't have a chance to walk down here further, and I now have done that. Ironically, when I first took that first shot down through this alley, I had just walked by the museum, which was about 30 yards from where I was. Calle de Princesa, and saw this beautiful place. As I say, I was about a few yards away from the Picasso Museum. I then went for a wide walk around the museum until I got to it down in this direction. Pursue the things that I saw that I would like to have seen if I could have stopped then. So we'll enter this park now. It's a very pretty, what I assume to be an early 19th century building. On either side of this central courtyard appear to be greenhouses. Maybe there's another entrance into here. Well, this is the Castle of the 3 Dragons, but I still have no idea where we are. It's a long park-like area in between these buildings here. We'll just have to wander around and figure it out. Oh, look at this. This is apparently the name of where we're at, which is this big area of green right here. Where I'm situated now is just across the street. In other words, on this side of the yellow line, from those 2 lines that go from the upper left, further upper left. In other words, this area right up in here, which is there, the Arc de Triomphe down there. What we'll do is go down and explore that, down to the Arc de Triomphe, come back to here, and then explore the rest of this park. Beautiful Art Deco lampposts, dramatic, and many of them. I bet at night this is gorgeous. Now, this really would be a truly elegant place to live if you had a reason. Imagine what it costs to own one of those places, particularly up on top. What a spectacle. I'll move off to this outer walkway. The top Baroque with this metal vessels, big and small, dotting and profusion. The wall, the perimeters, this big promenade. And that elevator is apparently parking for the Saba apartments. What were parks made for, if not that? These guys determined to spend the day? Yep. I don't think this is park exhibition like we saw on the La Ramblas. I think it's just straight exhibitionism. Another cute little character detail on the big arch, as well as apparently the obligatory angels in this Catholic country. Facing away from the arcade, it looks like there's also the boulevard continues in a very pretty manner with lots of trees. And there in the distance, off to the north, a couple buildings look interesting. The one on the left looks like something from London, although it has some color on it, which is interesting. And then the other looks like a train station, but of the 19th century variety. Get in a little bit closer. Has that look about it. You can see the color I'm referring to on that building. A little bit different technique. Nope. No, not quite. How do you tell who won? I don't know. And all the balls are. Don't know what this building is. Must be the courthouse, Justica. As we walk back, there is the Castle of the Three Dragons. Very pretty park with its own bike path. Wonder how far this bike path goes. This set of parks all alone would make it a superior and more beautiful place than Madrid. Madrid's mainly a collection of a few important buildings. That's it.